year. Anyway, I believe I've killed enough time. So, ladies and gentlemen, a person who in this crowd needs absolutely no introduction, Cory Doctorow.
Thank you. Thank you. So when I speak in places where the first language of the nation is not English, there is a disclaimer and an apology, because I am one of nature's fast talkers. When I was at the United Nations at the World Intellectual Property Organization, I was known as the scourge of the simultaneous translation corps. I would stand up and speak and turn around, and there would be window after window of translator, and every one of them would be doing this. So in advance, I give you permission when I start talking quickly to do this, and I will slow down. So tonight's talk, tonight's talk is not a copyright talk. I do copyright talks all the time. Questions about culture and creativity are interesting enough, but to be honest, I'm quite sick of them. If you want to hear freelance writers like me bang on about what's happening to the way that we earn our living, by all means, go and find one of the many talks I've done on this subject on YouTube. But tonight, I want to talk about something more important. I want to talk about general-purpose computers. Because general-purpose computers are, in fact, astounding. So astounding that our society is still struggling to come to grips with them, to figure out what they're for, to figure out how to accommodate them and how to cope with them. Which, unfortunately, brings me back to copyright. Because the general shape of the copyright wars and the lessons they can teach us about the upcoming fights over the destiny of the general-purpose computer are important. In the beginning, we had packaged software and the attendant industry, and we had sneakernet. So we had floppy disks in Ziploc bags or in cardboard boxes, hung on pegs in shops and sold like candy bars and magazines. And they were eminently susceptible to duplication, and so they were duplicated quickly and widely, and this was to the great chagrin of people who made and sold software. Enter DRM 0.96. They started to introduce physical defects to the disks, or started to insist on other physical indicia which the software could check for. Dongles, hidden sectors, challenge response protocols that required that you had physical possession of large, unwieldy manuals that were difficult to copy. And of course, these failed for two reasons. First, they were commercially unpopular, of course, because they reduced the usefulness of the software to the legitimate purchasers while leaving the people who took the software without paying for it untouched. The legitimate purchasers resented the non-functionality of their backups. They hated the loss of scarce ports to the authentication dongles, and they resented the inconvenience of having to transport large manuals when they wanted to run their software. And second, these didn't stop pirates, who found it trivial to patch the software and bypass authentication. Typically, the way that happened is some expert who had possession of technology and expertise of equivalent sophistication to the software vendor itself would reverse engineer the software and release cracked versions that quickly became widely circulated. While this kind of expertise in technology sounded highly specialized, it really wasn't. Figuring out what recalcitrant programs were doing and routing around the defects in shitty floppy disk media were both core skills for computer programmers, and were even more so in the era of fragile floppy disks and the rough and ready early days of software development. Anti-copying strategies only became more fraught as networks spread. Once we had BBSs, online services, Usenet newsgroups, and mailing lists, the expertise of people who figured out how to defeat these authentication systems could be packaged up in software and passed around as little crack files, or, as the network capacity increased, the cracked disk images or executables themselves could be spread on their own, which gave us DRM 1.0. By 1996, it became clear to everyone in the halls of power that there was something important about to happen. We were about to have an information economy, whatever the hell that was. They assumed it meant an economy where we bought and sold information. Now, information technology makes things efficient, so imagine the markets that an information economy would have. You could buy a book for a day. You could sell the right to watch the movie for €1, and then you could rent out the pause button at 1 penny per second. You could sell movies for one price in one country and another price in another, and so on and so on. The fantasies of those days were a little like a boring science fiction adaptation of the Old Testament book of Numbers, a kind of tedious enumeration of every permutation of things people do with information and the ways we could charge them for it. But none of this would be possible unless we could control how people use their computers and the files that we transfer to them. After all, it was well and good to talk about selling someone the 24-hour right to a video or the right to move music onto an iPod, but not the right to move music from the iPod onto another device. But how the hell could you do that once you'd given them the file? In order to make this work, you needed to figure out how to stop computers from running certain programs and inspecting certain files and processes. For example, you could encrypt the file and then require the user to run a program that only unlocked the file under certain circumstances. But as they say on the internet, now you have two problems. You also now have to stop the user from saving the file while it's in the clear, and you have to stop the user from figuring out where the unlocking program stores its keys, because if the user finds the keys, she'll just decrypt the file and throw away that stupid player app. And now you have three problems, because now you have to stop the users who figure out how to render the file in the clear from sharing it with other users. And now you've got four problems, because now you have to stop the users who figure out how to extract secrets from unlocking programs from telling other users how to do it too. And now you've got five problems, because now you have to stop users who figure out how to extract secrets from unlocking programs from telling other users what the secrets were. That's a lot of problems. But by 1996, we had a solution. We had the WIPO Copyright Treaty passed by the United Nations World Intellectual Property Organization, which created laws that made it illegal to extract secrets from unlocking programs. And it created laws that made it illegal to extract media clear texts from the unlocking programs while they were running. And it created laws that made it illegal to tell people how to extract secrets from unlocking programs. And it created laws that made it illegal to host copyrighted works and secrets, and all with a handy, streamlined process that lets you remove stuff from the internet without having to screw around with lawyers and judges and all that crap. And with that, illegal copying ended forever. The information economy The information economy blossomed into a beautiful flower that brought prosperity to the whole wide world. As they say on the aircraft carriers, mission accomplished. Well, of course, that's not how the story ends, because pretty much anyone who understood computers and networks understood that while these laws would create more problems than they could possibly solve. After all, these were laws that made it illegal to look inside your computer when it was running certain programs. They made it illegal to tell people what you found when you looked inside your computer. They made it easy to censor material on the internet without having to prove that anything wrong had happened. In short, they made unrealistic demands on reality, and reality did not oblige them. After all, copying only got easier following the passage of these laws. Copying will only ever get easier. Here, 2011, this is as hard as copying will get. Your grandchildren will turn to you around the Christmas table and say, "Tell me again, Grandpa, tell me again, Grandma, about when it was hard to copy things in 2011, when you couldn't get a drive the size of your fingernail that could hold every song ever recorded, every movie ever made, every word ever spoken, every picture ever taken, everything, and transfer it in such a short period of time you didn't even notice it was doing it. Tell us again when it was so stupidly hard to copy things back in 2011. And so reality asserted itself, and everyone had a good laugh over how funny our misconceptions were when we entered the 21st century, and then a lasting peace was reached with freedom and prosperity for all. Well, not really. Because, like the nursery rhyme lady who swallows a spider to catch a fly and then has to swallow a bird to catch the spider and a cat to catch the bird and so on, so must a regulation that has broad general appeal but is disastrous in its implementation, beget a new regulation aimed at shoring up the failure of the old one. Now, it's tempting to stop the story here and conclude that the problem is that lawmakers are either clueless or evil, or possibly evilly clueless, and just leave it there, which is not a very satisfying place to go, because it's fundamentally a counsel of despair. It suggests that our problems cannot be solved for so long as stupidity and evilness are present in the halls of power, which is to say they will never be solved. But I have another theory about what's happened. It's not that regulators don't understand information technology, because it should be possible to be a non-expert and still make a good law. MPs and congressmen and so on are elected to represent districts and people, not disciplines and issues. We don't have a member of parliament for biochemistry, and we don't have a senator from the great state of urban planning, and we don't have an MEP from child welfare. But perhaps we should. And yet those people who are experts in policy and politics and not technical disciplines nevertheless often do manage to pass good rules that make sense, and that's because government relies on heuristics, rules of thumb about how to balance out expert input from different sides of an issue. But information technology confounds these heuristics. It kicks the crap out of them in one important way, and this is it. One important test of whether or not a regulation is fit for purpose is first whether, of course, it will work, but second of all, whether or not in the course of doing its work, it will have lots of effects on everything else. If I wanted Congress or Parliament or the EU to regulate a wheel, it's unlikely I'd succeed. If I turned up and said, well, everyone knows wheels are good and right, but have you noticed that every single bank robber has 4 wheels on his car when he drives away from the bank robbery? Can't we do something about this? The answer would, of course, be no. Because we don't know how to make a wheel that is still generally useful for legitimate wheel applications, but useless to bad guys. And we can all see that the general benefits of wheels are so profound that we'd be foolish to risk them in a foolish errand to stop bank robberies by changing wheels. Even if there were an epidemic of bank robberies, even if society were on the verge of collapse thanks to bank robberies, no one would think that wheels were the right place to start solving our problems. But if I were to show up in that same body to say that I had absolute proof that hands-free phones were making cars dangerous, and I said, I would like you to pass a law that says it's illegal to put a hands-free phone in a car, the regulator might say, yeah, I take your point, we'll do that. And we might disagree about whether or not this is a good idea or whether or not my evidence made sense, but very few of us would say, well, once you take the hands-free phones out of the car, they stop being cars. We understand that we can keep cars cars even if we remove features from them. Cars are special purpose, at least in comparison to wheels, and all that the addition of a hands-free phone does is add one more feature to an already specialized technology. In fact, there's the heuristic that we can apply here. Special purpose technologies are complex, and you can remove features from them without doing fundamental disfiguring violence to their underlying utility. This rule of thumb serves regulators by and large, but it is rendered null and void by the general purpose computer and the general purpose network, the PC and the internet. Because if you think of computer software as a feature, that is, a computer with spreadsheets running on it has a spreadsheet feature, and one that's running World of Warcraft has an MMORPG feature, then this heuristic leads you to think that you could reasonably say, make me a computer that doesn't run spreadsheets, and that it would be no more an attack on computing than make me a car without a hands-free phone is an attack on cars. And if you think of protocols and sites as features of the network, then saying, fix the internet so that it doesn't run BitTorrent, or fix the internet so that the piratebay.org no longer resolves, it sounds a lot like change the sound of busy signals, or take that pizzeria on the corner off the phone network, and not like an attack on the fundamental principles of internetworking. Not realizing that this rule of thumb that works for cars and houses and every other substantial area of technological regulation fails for the internet does not make you evil, and it does not make you an ignoramus. It just makes you part of that vast majority of the world for whom ideas like Turing complete and end-to-end are meaningless. So our regulators go off and they blithely pass these laws, and they become part of the reality of our technological world.